Tell me about the concept of non-resistant...
Non-resistant nonbelief. It's trivially true that there are non-believers in God. What's built into the qualifier of non-resistant is the possible notion that a non-believer is resisting it in some way, as is described in Romans 1, for example, in unrighteousness, perhaps, or through psychological motivation, or through any number of psychological factors. Is it possible that every human who has ever existed acknowledges God in that way, but that we set up our own psychological barriers to not let that enter our consciousness, and or it does bleed over and we're just constantly tamping it down and, denying things. But the notion is, if there's a non-resistant non-believer, someone who is either neutral to the idea of God being a part of their life and or even desiring it to be part of their life, and this is a category I put myself in when I was deconverting, desperately wanting God to be real. Why would those such people not be able to intellectually assent or be convinced that a God exists? Setting aside whether or not that type of a person can exist in practicality, if that person can exist theoretically at least, a non-resistant non-believer, totally open to the notion of God, but they just looking around at the evidence and they just don't see it or just are unconvinced. Can that be compatible with the notion that there is a God out there who wants to have a relationship with that person, and the only barrier between that relationship happening is some amount of further evidence?
I'll go on the record and say that the problem of divine hiddenness can also be seen in the scriptures, in the Bible, but from a broader perspective. So Job, for example, the book of Job is about human suffering. Job calls out for God. Where is God? He thinks God is being unfair to him. This is where a lot of Christians get this wrong. I think Job has bad theology. The narrator's theology is what people should be learning from, because we've got the big picture perspective. But Job's theology leads him to accuse God of being unfair and unjust. But Job doesn't doubt God's existence. But God is distant and hidden. So you do see one aspect of a broader view of divine hiddenness, but one that doesn't lead Job to doubt God's existence. Whereas for Schellenberg and perhaps you, it's very much an intellectual assent issue. So
right,
I think
that's a good clarification.
So we're looking at sort of a narrower view of the intellectual assent.